edition of the Expert Q&A here on Up and to the Right. So I want to introduce Eric Huddleston, who's the CEO of Aprimo. And today we're going to talk with him about account-based marketing. So Eric, real quick, you want to introduce yourself? Tell us a little about your background.
Yeah, absolutely. So Eric Huddleston, I am the CEO of Aprimo. Aprimo powers the content lifecycle for a ton of the world's largest companies. And prior to that, I was president of Cision. Prior to that, CEO of TrainKite, and you go all the way back in time. I was one of the first employees at literally the first digital marketing platform. So I've been in the MarTech space a very long time. In addition to being a CEO, I've been a CMO and ran marketing several times. So the idea of account-based marketing is near and dear to my heart.
Got it. Well, cool. So let's get started with that then. First of all, I always like to start with these types of concepts with your definition. How would you define account-based marketing? And I guess, how would you compare it and contrast it to maybe more traditional marketing approaches?
Yeah, absolutely. So account-based marketing, and this, I will caveat that, I view this through a SaaS lens.
Sure.
And for account-based marketing, it's really a B2B marketing tool largely. So we're really, kind of in the universe of B2B SaaS. And, the concept of account-based marketing was really popularized in the advertising space, and it was really about some early innovations in tracking of individuals based on their titles and their organizations, not just from a behavioral or content or other targeting activities. And so a lot of people think about account-based marketing from that context, but that's really unfair because account-based marketing is a lot deeper than that. It's really, instead of being lead-centric, which has been kind of the classic way to approach particularly inbound marketing, but marketing in general and B2B, it's account-centric. So you're thinking about the organization, the buying units, the buyer personas inside of those buying units, and you're treating the account holistically as you move them through the buyer journey instead of transactionally based on the interaction points of individuals with your channels.
So historically, when we talk about lead based, we're really thinking about a human being, a single person comes in and requests a demo, or they show some interest or something, and then we would engage with that individual through some kind of a sales cycle. And what you're saying is we view the individuals as part of the collective unit, the account that ultimately does the buying. Is that largely kind of the distinction between the kind of account approach and thinking about leads?
Yeah, absolutely. And just a toy example to drive that point home, you talk about interacting with the content. So you can imagine, for most organizations, you have some kind of lead scoring and thresholding strategy, where as the lead score increases, you allocate BDR-esque resources to reach out, or in general, you start your targeting activities once they've reached a certain threshold. So think about a classic lead strategy with that. If you had 10 people come to your website today and interact with one piece of content, you would start tracking those 10 people, but you probably wouldn't do anything with any of them right off the bat. However, if you had 10 people from one company come to your website and download a piece of content, all of a sudden you have 10 interactions from an organization, and that's a heck of a buying signal. With that account context, and again, this trivial example, you see that you get a lot more intelligence and fidelity to your marketing savviness than you do when you're transactional. That said, depending on the sophistication of your sales cycle,
Mhm.
that may be the level of sophistication you need. Like if you are B2C, or if you're selling to SMBs, with a very simple transactional product, maybe you don't need the weight and sophistication of account-based marketing strategy, because there's one person at that sole proprietorship.
Right. Okay. So I want to come back to how this kind of enmeshes with the sales cycle and the whole go-to-market process above and beyond just the marketing and
Mhm.
demand generation process. But I want to also tee up something that I think is important about account-based marketing, which is really thinking about the whole customer life cycle, right? And again, this is kind of coming out of not just thinking about executing a particular transaction, but thinking about a long-term relationship between your company and an account out there, whether they're hopefully going to be a customer but are not one yet, to their becoming a customer, to their have been a customer and will stay that way ideally, right? So I know when you and I have talked in the past, you've talked about this customer life cycle and sliced the different stages pretty thinly in different ways of thinking about how the customers engage. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on how do you need to think about that customer life cycle? What are the stages? What are the transition points? What are the signals you're looking for as an account moves through these stages?
Yeah, so two fundamental concepts in account-based marketing that have to be wrestled with. Fundamentally, in account-based marketing is aggregating all of the knowledge that you learn about an account
Mhm.
over time, so that you can more efficiently apply that knowledge for conversion purposes at the appropriate time. That goes beyond just generating revenue, because it has all sorts of, of value in and of itself, and from customer satisfaction to
Mhm.
value realization to a whole bunch of things. But that core concept then translates into a pretty fundamental go-to-market motion optimization.
Mhm.
When you think about your objective from a sales motion or a go-to-market motion, you're really, more than anything else, trying to drive throughput through a limited set of resources. So
Mhm.
how can I reduce cycle time, and how can I reduce CAC investments in converting an account? And
Mhm.
and those two things are really the hallmarks of account-based marketing, because you know if you're doing industry average, you're converting low double digits percentages of your leads to close deals.
Mhm.
So that means the vast majority of opportunities are close lost, either
Mhm.
to a competitor or to no decision, or whatever the taxonomy is of reasons people don't buy.
Right.
However, that doesn't mean they're not in your target market. You
Mhm.
know, Otherwise you wouldn't have been interacting with them in the first place. And so one of the keys to account-based marketing then is being able to leverage that account intelligence that you have from your failed sales cycles to then reapply later at a more opportune moment to one, engage at the right time, two, to say the right things, and then three, to be sure that whatever nurture you do in the interim is appropriate to whatever reason it is that they failed. So, that account-based marketing approach then, allows you to pick up a sales cycle, uh, you know, closer to where you left it off when you close lost it than cold,
Mhm.
which reduces the overall CAC that you have to apply to win an account, and then in most cases also compresses your sales cycle length. The two kind of magic items that you try to optimize for and go to market.
Hmm. So one of the things that I think is kind of fascinating about this, and you touched on it, is when you move away from this idea of sort of the sales cycle being the fundamental unit of, like, I get a lead, I work it to completion, I lose 90% of those, right? Whatever the case may be, to this longer term engagement, right? Where you're thinking about not only the dimension of like firmographic fit of like the ICP, these folks are correct for our, addressable market, et cetera. This account is somebody we could sell to, but the timing was wrong or we weren't able to do it this time. And so we get to pick it up again and start over, or not start over. That's the key thing, not start over, right? Is to take it from where it was previously. A couple of things come out, that I think about kind of come out in that thinking. Number one is, how do you really operationalize that, right? A lot of people, coming from a bit of an operations background, myself, a lot of people kind of say, well, let's capture a handful of close loss reasons, right? So we can look back at them later, right? That kind of thing. How do you really operationalize that idea of capturing the intelligence and the value from even a lost sales cycle and then applying it to the next sales cycle?
Yeah. So, one of the fundamental concepts that I'll just pick up from your comment, which is, the close loss reasons. And I won't really call it necessarily a close loss reason, but the body of information surrounding why the deal was closed. So, let's say we lost it to a competitor. Okay, which competitor? How long was the contract that they have with the new competitor? Who were the individuals that made that decision, and what were the key points of differentiation from your messaging that either failed or succeeded for them from a positioning standpoint that made them have that decision. And if you expend just the close loss reason to lost competitor, or somebody will raise the bar sometimes with lost competitor X's name, but instead also capture the rest of the knowledge around that lost sales cycle, all of a sudden you now have a huge opportunity from an account-based marketing standpoint to then go reapply that, for example, to the nurture campaign. Let's say that you lost it to competitor X to a 1-year contract. So now then I know it's competitor X, so I can have a custom nurture program. Let's say, it was, the CFO liked them because of price, and, the economic buyer liked them because, they had this one, feature that they thought was going to save them a lot of money.
Right.
So I know the two personas now, and I know why they chose who they did. And I probably have some pretty good messaging or positioning against those two things that I just failed in the sales cycle to tell a convincing story. But they're going to find out as they work through their implementation, or through their 1-year journey with this company. So I might set up nurture tracks with the CFO on the total cost of ownership, because you're probably going to hear chirping about, I need some extra budget for integrations, or I need some extra budget for consultants, or that he didn't know that he was going to have to pay, or she wasn't going to have to pay. And so now that I've got that stream going over, say the next 6 months of custom messaging to the CFO around all those extra nickels and dimes that they had to pay, on the key feature, I have another stream with that economic buyer around how that key feature isn't what it's cracked up to be, and how our implementation of it solves probably the operational problem that she's feeling in his or her organization right now. So that now then, when I get 7 or 8 months into that contract, operationalizing this, my Salesforce.com or whatever my CRM is, pops up the time to engage with a cadence. It picks the right cadence, and you have a sales rep that's now engaged in a fertile sales cycle. So that would be an example of operationalizing, just on the sales cycle side. But it also goes beyond just that account level view on the close loss, and it also goes to the close ones and the personas. So, for example, that same level of account information capture, I want to operationalize as they go through the buyer journey. So, you know, for example, if I'm running NPS surveys on a persona basis, I'm going to be collecting that data, and of course, my customer success organization is going to use that. But I'm also going to use that from an account-based marketing standpoint as I watch people, leave organizations and go somewhere else. It's like, holy cow, my economic buyer who was a champion just left to, become the CMO at, Acme Corp.
Mhm.
That should be a trigger to me to reach out to that CMO with a similar value proposition that I know, made successful or her successful when they were a customer of mine, or
Mhm.
a detractor, say in IT, who hated the complexity of our rollout,
Right.
just went to an existing customer. It's
Mhm.
like, oh, okay, now that I've got someone that's going to be throwing stones at an otherwise, happy customer
Mhm.
and reopening, maybe a painful past. So there may be a customer success play from an account-based marketing standpoint that I now need to run so that I don't have a critical account at renewal due to that injection. So it's not just about the sales cycle. It's
Mhm.
not just about the macro account. It's also about the people in the account and each stage of the buyer journey, the information that you collect and that you use in those stages.
So, um, I think one of the things that I'm hearing in a lot of these descriptions, right, is you talk about these ideas of these plays that you can run everything from, call it loosely a play toward, how you uh, how you structure a cadence at a particular point in time, or how you focus on a particular decision maker or something like that, all the way to when a point of contact moves between organizations like you're describing. One of the sort of underlying themes with all that, I think, is a high level of organizational coordination internally, right? That you have, you need marketing to be on board, customer marketing specifically in the case of those types of, some of those cadences to internal folks, or some of the, monitoring of POCs, to your sales reps knowing like I should engage at this point in time, all of that. So I think because, account-based marketing, well, it's got marketing in the title, right? A lot of times when I talk to folks, people start thinking about it purely as a marketing tactic. And you said yourself at the beginning, it came out of the idea.
Account-based everything.
Right. So account-based everything. So let's talk about how you need to actually align your organization, especially given your perspective as a multi-time CEO. How do you align your go-to-market organization to support this concept across the board, not just with the marketing team, not just with the sales team?
Yeah. All right, I'll take a very deep breath on that one. So that's a very deep rabbit hole. At the highest level, and you said this at the very beginning. You really have to think about your buyer journey or your
Mm.
macro revenue funnel. So most people think about they've got their inbound funnel, and then they've got their outbound funnel, and then they've got a sales process with stages, and then customer success, if they're on the ball, has maybe a couple of defined phases. Are we in onboarding right now or not, as an example? Um, and instead of those kind of siloed, uh, uh, department level, uh, organizational metaphors, you really have to think about the entire buyer journey. And it's almost like a manufacturing floor, right?
Mhm.
Where you have raw material, which are your accounts that
Mhm.
are in your total addressable market, and they're all, sitting out, on the in the yard, waiting to enter the factory. And then at each stage of that buyer journey, there's some set of machinery there and some set of resources or workers that are performing an operation on those raw materials and refining it a little bit And when you think of it that way, you're always thinking about what's the value that I'm creating, the unit of value I'm creating in each one of those stages as an input to the next stage. And those results metrics then give you a cohesive thread through that buyer journey.
Mhm.
And then I think about like what are the leading indicators that tells me that I'm going to have a good result in the future.
Mhm.
And if I'm not, then it's the diagnostic metrics that tell me whether, help me diagnose what's going wrong. So perhaps if it's if we're talking about some kind of engagement stage where I'm
Mhm.
where I'm getting accounts to interact with my content, get educated on my value proposition, and I'm trying to get them to take a phone call from BDR
Mhm.
as my output. My results metrics could be the average deal size times the number of buying units at an account
Mhm.
that are agreed to have to a demo appointment.
Right.
And so that is my results metric. And then my leading indicators may be things like appointments that have set but haven't happened. It could be things like the number of accounts with an engagement score over some number,
Mhm.
if you use some kind of scoring technology.
Mhm.
And then my diagnostic metrics may be something like white paper downloads or email ratios of opens to clicks, so I know the quality of those emails. I could start to diagnose why I'm not getting the result that I need. And then uh, those leading indicators, then you pull those out in the results metric, and that's how you build your forecasting model. So
Mhm.
you understand the throughput and how smoothly things are going to move through
Mhm.
your factory floor. And so you can imagine every one of those stages in your buyer journey becomes like a little, a little math problem, a little model in a spreadsheet that all roll up to, your financials. That being the second piece. The third piece then being the instrumentation of your business, so that you've automated at a minimum the results metrics and those leading indicators. And then, from there, it's about, your optimization. So as I get results from my factory and I feed those leading indicators into some kind of forecast model that predicts the future, it tells me where my bottlenecks are that I need to go solve, and that becomes my change management processes internally for my go to market. It could be OKRs or something similar.
So I think that metaphor makes a lot of sense to me, and having kind of each one of these stages that you're moving a customer through makes a lot of sense when you and the way you measure the inputs and outputs of those stages and ultimately the performance at each stage also makes a ton of sense. How do you um, to maybe extend the factory metaphor a little bit further, you've got, some people working each of the machines, each of the stations. You've got some folks overseeing each of the stations, right? How do you actually translate all those metrics into, management structure and management responsibility? How do you ensure that your top line folks, your VP of marketing, your VP of sales, your VP of customer success, that they're all aligned on those metrics and those inputs and outputs, and that you can quickly diagnose problems that are happening today that might mean that you're going to have churn 12 months later, so basically your demand gen folks are potentially saying something that could impact your customer success leader, you know with trailing 18 months, right? Those kinds of things. So
Yeah.
how do you get the people all aligned to be thinking this way?
Yeah. So, I mean, the first thing, it's a little bit fluffy, but it's just having a vocabulary to talk about it. So,
Mhm.
having a well-defined, buyer journey with the stages, the objectives of each stage, those results metrics and those leading indicators well-defined, the definitions of the resources, the teams that are involved in the stage.
Mhm.
the key customer interactions that are taking place in those stages. Like, in one stage, it may be the demo meeting. In another stage, it may be the red lines. In another stage, it may be the training session in onboarding. So it's just having the vocabulary of personas and stages and the metrics, and then you can talk about it as an organization. The second thing is to have it instrumented, because the mark of a challenged organization will be when when you have an FP&A team building spreadsheets that they then hand to an operations team who creates PowerPoints, who then calls a meeting to discuss the results. And that fact pattern tells you that you're going to have a hard time managing performance. So it has to be automated. It has to be real time and continuous. So that's the second piece of it: getting your data warehouse, all the data in, because it's siloed. You have sales data over in Salesforce, marketing data over in Marketo or HubSpot. You got customer success data over in Gainside or Churn Zero or who knows what. Getting it all in one place, aligning it to that funnel so you can see the optimization points. That's the second thing, because then there's not friction to asking the questions of what's going on with the business. The third component of it, to keep everybody on the same page, is kind of like that forecast model or some way of taking yesterday's weather to predict tomorrow's success. So those leading indicators at current conversion rates, what does that mean from a results metrics standpoint 3 months from now? Then the fourth component of that is a rhythm of the business that creates the environment where you can have the conversations about what's going right, what's going wrong, and why. And those have to be frequent, so cycle time becomes important, and they have to be cross-functional. So this is everything from your quarterly planning cycles, annual planning cycles, quarterly planning cycles, monthly operation reviews, your weekly staff meetings, down to the one-on-ones that cascade down from the CEO to the executives to the senior leaders to the line knowledge workers and employees. And so that allows you to disseminate the information down and sort of crowdsource causes up, and then you need a mechanism for actually enacting change on what you've learned. So like an OKR process or something else that lets you look at the bottlenecks in your factory, and so the bottlenecks in that buyer journey, and then have a systematic and thoughtful cross-functional approach to solving those. Because a lot of times, there's a cultural aspect of siloing that takes place. Let's say the classic one is, we have a top of funnel problem. I don't know how many times, even this week, and it's like Wednesday, and so you have a bunch of executives and all look around and go, well, we got a top of funnel problem. Sucks to be the VP of marketing. This is a real bummer. I can't close any deals unless I get more leads from marketing. And if you have a cross-functional approach and an account-based marketing approach, that's not always the case, because you externalize the problem in the context of a macro buyer's journey. And while yes, we would love for marketing to go get us more leads, and I'm sure they have all sorts of plans to do that. But in the interim, our sales organization, may up their sales generated opportunity, quotient at the expense of, say, conversion rates or sales cycle length. Our customer success organization may shift resources into expansion for shorter, sales cycle opportunities, so we solved the macro lead problem
Right.
in the short term, while another organization would suffer financial issues waiting
Mhm.
for marketing to get their act together. So those are the five things that you kind of have to have and why in order to get kind of the entire organization aligned uh, on your ABM approach.
Some of those things sound like they would be fairly useful ABM aside, just in terms of making sure everybody's all aligned in how the organization works operationally. I think so. One of the things that has become a theme in a lot of these conversations that I've been having is something that you just touched on, which is this idea of, okay, we've got a shortfall, or we have some kind of a challenge over here. So what do we do to make up for it? And those things are often cross-functional in nature, right? Like, so we have a demand generation problem. We can't solve that like by there's some stuff we got to diagnose, some stuff we got to fix. So let's figure out what we can do over here. And some of that's just problem solving, but some of it becomes much more of like at a CEO level, it's sort of a, a fungibility kind of thing where you're thinking about, how do I allocate resources? Our goal is to drive revenue growth of X, right? And so I can allocate resources to demand gen because I think that's the best way to do it, or I could allocate resources to folks who are, dialing for dollars, right? Like those are things I could do. But another thing that's come up in a lot of the conversations I've been in you know, is kind of blending in product-led growth with that. So I'm throwing out another acronym here, PLG, right? And one of the most interesting aspects of that, I think, that's kind of come into play over the past couple of years is this idea of, well, the dollars I might spend on, more traditional demand gen or more traditional SDR functions or something, maybe I spend it in the product to change how the product actually creates, funnels or creates demand for me. So one of the things, kind of tying this all back into ABM as the kind of centerpiece of the conversation, how do you see an ABM approach and a PLG approach working together? Are they ever at odds, or do you just integrate them? Is it easy enough to integrate them into a larger strategy? How would you recommend a company think about that?
Yeah. Yeah. So they're certainly not mutually exclusive. In fact,
Mhm.
I would to think I'm gonna say this without completely having thought it through, but almost every product-led growth company executes an ABM strategy at some level.
All right.
And that's just because, when you do think about how you're allocating the human element of
Mhm.
CAC resource, sales reps, et cetera, it's almost always, some variant on, well, let's look at the accounts that have the most potential and the most activity,
Mhm.
and let's have sales reps parachute in there and see if we can't take round all these people up and get an enterprise deal, or
Mhm.
get them to introduce us to their buddies in Europe, or some way of accelerate, being an accelerant on
Mhm.
the natural viral lever that the PLG strategy has.
Mhm.
So I'd say first I would go that way.
Mhm.
Now, when I think about it from an ABM centric approach, this is really about what funnels are available. Overusing now the term funnels, maybe channels are available to your organization to drive demand.
Mhm.
Maybe I have a great inbound channel. Maybe I have a very strong outbound SDR dialing for dollars channel. Maybe I have a strong partner channel. I have resellers, or I have an affiliate program, or maybe I have a strong product-led growth channel.
Mhm.
So you start to then think about the silo channels. So here's my MQLs and my SQLs, and you know my PGLs, and my you start to then think about it in terms of it's just another channel that I have to drive demand. Now that I know that every PLG person out there just shrieked in terror at the same time, but that would be the ABM centric way of kind of viewing how that slots in.
Right. Okay. That makes sense. And I think you said something that I want to touch on, right? Is that if you're doing PLG, you almost have to be doing ABM. And I think that's to a large
It's
degree, I
not
think that
always,
is,
but
well, but I think the overlap is certainly significant. I had been thinking more about it from the reverse of thinking, ABM usually is you sort of associate it with maybe larger deal sizes or a little bit more of an enterprise or larger sale that usually involves some level of significant seller engagement, right? Whereas at least one flavor of PLG is a little bit more demand generation focused, right? It's free trials or free tiers, those types of things that bring people in the door, and therefore make it a little bit more reactive, right, versus driving that kind of larger scale ABM approach. And I think another thing that's important to think about there is the PLG flavor that is much more oriented towards having easy growth opportunities within your product to expand an existing customer naturally lends itself to an ABM approach, and especially like
yeah,
an ongoing customer marketing approach.
yeah, and we have the asterisk from the beginning of the conversation that the context that we're really going from here is uh, B2B SaaS,
Right.
right? So you have, in fact, most of the early PLG successes were all consumer
Mhm.
or prosumer. So in those cases, there's no ABM really.
Right.
But in the B2B world, you think about most of the famous PLG engines are either viral adoption through an organization, or the nature of value creation jumps the firewall. Think like Box or Dropbox or
Right.
Zoom, or whether somehow the collaborate you're going to partake in the value proposition of my adoption
Mhm.
when you're not a customer. And so that's either internal or across organization. In both of those cases, when you think about how you optimize conversion rates, they're typically some form of ABM tactic that you're going to use to layer on top of your viral lever in the product to get better conversion rates out of the viral loop.
Right. So, one of the things that makes me think of is you talk about kind of jumping out of the firewall, right? Like what you're bringing these sort of consumer experiences, in some cases, even consumers or people who are not acting in the capacity of their business, right? They're coming in and using the product, and then they can kind of jump back into the firewall, right, and bring it into their organization and adopt it um, more broadly. And so one of the things that makes me, you know, one of the things that makes me think about is, some of those PLG companies like that have widened kind of what could be considered their TAM, right? Like it's not just companies that look like X. It's looser organizations, nonprofits, or little groups, or something like that. If you think about something like Slack, and so one of the things that I think brought about ABM, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that most B2B sellers have it doesn't mean it's a small TAM, but they have a constrained TAM. There's a universe of accounts out there that they are selling to. And one of the things that I feel like ABM does is it tries to limit waste in that pool of
Mhm.
accounts, right? So if you have a 20,000 company TAM, whatever that is, right, then you don't want to waste any of those 20,000 companies. You want to try to maximize the value out of that entire pool. So most B2B companies have some of those kinds of restrictions on the overall TAM that they can go after. So that leads me down, to my final question is, um, if that's a fundamental concept within ABM marketing, is to maximize the value of that TAM because it's somewhat constrained. When are there B2B scenarios where you wouldn't want to use ABM, and are there?
Absolutely. I've talked about a few of them,
Mhm.
and it's when it's the sales cycle complexity is small.
Mhm.
Uh, the good or service is more transactional,
Mhm.
and then it's almost all of B2C. And so if any of those things are true, the additional complexity and kind of CAC investment that you make in ABM, it just won't yield much
Right.
because you know if if it's a three-man shop that I'm selling into,
Mhm.
I don't get a lot of incremental value figuring out who the other two people are and marketing to them directly. Uh, you know, Likewise, if you're buying, a $5 one-time product from me, the lifetime value that you represent, may not be enough for me to really have a deep investment in, kind of account analytics and all of those things. So that's the second axis.
Mhm. So, I mean, it comes back to, I guess, just the standard way of thinking of lifetime value versus, acquisition costs. So your LTV to CAC just kind of plays in. And I guess so the implicit assumption there is that the that at a certain scale and a certain LTV, the CAC, the additional CAC investment of ABM pays off, and ultimately you generate more efficiency from like an LTV to CAC standpoint. Um, so, you know, do you feel like, as I just kind of work through that math in my head, you mentioned at the top of the discussion about the CAC efficiency that you get from ABM. If you're making that transition from maybe a non-ABM approach to an ABM approach, are you going to see an LTV to CAC dip and what looks like inefficiency before the ABM approach fully takes hold? And it might look like you're actually raising CAC without raising LTV. So it's sort of that transition point of how do you know whether or not a transition to ABM is actually working when it means short-term increases in CAC?
Typically people, when we talk about kind of holistic ABM approaches,
Mhm.
most people aren't really deliberate about it. It's not like I'm going to go, here's my, 753 plays I'm going to run across my 13 stages of the
Right.
buyer journey and, against the 6 personas and the 84 key activities. You usually don't do that.
Mhm.
What ends up happening is specific ABM tactics are CAC optimizers that you just keep organically plugging into your go-to-market until light bulbs go off, or you just organically kind of get an ABM orientation to your go-to-market. So typically, it's not a CAC dip.
Mhm.
It's just a very gradual CAC optimization. The other thing that I would say though, it's not just about CAC to LTV,
Mhm.
but it's also about sales cycle length,
Mhm.
because by harvesting knowledge
Mhm.
from previous sales cycles, again, now we're talking about acquisition, uh, you know, I'm largely, in a large number of cases, able to shorten sales cycle length. And when you shorten sales cycle length, what you're really doing is freeing up CAC dollars for reinvestment faster.
Right.
So you get kind of the opposite of the dip, because if my CAC payback period is 9 months, and I go from a 6 month sales cycle to a 3 month sales cycle, all of a sudden I can almost double the throughput of ARR of new ARR generation,
Right.
just 100% off of sales cycle reduction and not off of CAC reduction.
Right. you could double the throughput, but CAC is not necessarily bound by. I mean, sales cycle length is a feature or is part of the CAC, right? But CAC is also driven by, I call it, some level of fixed cost, and that you like there's some sort of top of funnel like demand kind of acquisition cost, and then you have whatever your sales cycle length is that may or may not linearly expand that CAC, I guess is what I'm saying. So I feel like we're going to need to give people some kind of a glossary to follow the last few minutes of this conversation. Certainly, at least there's been a lot of 3-letter acronyms thrown around. So, well, I think I really appreciate the deep dive. 3-letter acronyms. I think we ended up explaining most of them in case anybody hadn't encountered them before. So that was awesome. So thank you very much, Eric. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right.